My heart thundered in my chest as I clutched the plane ticket in my trembling hand, imagining the European sun warming my parents' faces. Faces I had always adored and wished to see light up with joy. I had spent months meticulously planning a luxury trip to Europe as a heartfelt gift, a way to say thank you for years of unconditional love and sacrifice. Every detail had been perfect, from the five-star hotels to the gourmet dining experiences in Paris and Rome. But then, in a twist that shattered my carefully woven dreams, I learned that my parents had taken my jobless sister along instead. The betrayal cut deep, twisting my excitement into a bitter cocktail of hurt, confusion, and fierce determination to reclaim the truth. I still remember the moment I first heard the news. It was a chilly December morning when I called home, eager to share the final itinerary and see my parents' reaction. Instead of the expected exclamations of joy, my mother's voice was subdued, tinged with an apologetic regret that immediately set off alarms in my heart. "Sweetheart," she began haltingly, we've decided to take your sister on the trip instead." I almost couldn't breathe. I had poured all my savings and effort into making that gift a reality. My parents' decision felt like a cruel joke at my expense. A betrayal not only of my trust but of the love I believed we shared. For years my family had been my anchor. I was the one who had always strived to make them proud, working tirelessly as a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm while saving every spare penny to contribute to our family's future. I was proud of my independence and the strides I had made. I had always believed that family in its purest form was about support and mutual respect. So when I learned that my parents, whom I held in the highest regard, had chosen to gift my jobless sister, a woman who had long struggled to find her footing in life, instead of me, I felt an indescribable mix of disbelief and hurt. My sister Emily had always been the wild card of our family. Growing up, she was unpredictable, often drifting from one job to another, never quite fitting into the mold of responsibility that seemed to come naturally to me. I'd always been the reliable one, getting good grades, landing a stable job, and diligently saving for the future. While I never looked down on Emily, I often wondered how she would navigate life without a stable foundation. Our parents, especially our mother, had always been fiercely protective of her, sometimes to the point of indulgence. Perhaps they thought that this European vacation might be the catalyst to help her discover a new path, to inspire her to change. But for me it felt like a dismissal of everything I had worked for, the recognition of my efforts, my sacrifices, and my unwavering love for them. In the days following that devastating phone call, I retreated into a whirlwind of emotions. I sat for hours in my small apartment in downtown Seattle, staring blankly at the ceiling, trying to process how something meant to celebrate love and gratitude could so easily become a symbol of rejection. I replayed the conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every pause. Was it really that simple? Had I been so unimportant to them that they would rather give my parents a gift that belonged, in part, to me? I began questioning my own worth, wondering if I had done something wrong along the way, if my relentless pursuit of stability had somehow made me less exciting, less lovable. I turned to my journal, a constant companion through every phase of my life, and wrote down every thought and emotion in excruciating detail. With each word, I tried to untangle the knot of betrayal that had settled in my chest. I wrote about the long nights I had spent working overtime, the sacrifices I had made to save up for the trip, and the dreams I had nurtured of one day traveling the world with the people I loved. I poured out my hurt, my anger, and my deep-seated sense of abandonment. The act of writing was both cathartic and excruciating. It forced me to confront the raw truth of my feelings, even as I wished I could simply forget. I also sought the comfort of friends, calling my best friend, Sarah, late one night when the pain was almost unbearable. "They took Emily," I sobbed, unable to control the tremor in my voice. Sarah's response was immediate and filled with empathy. "I'm so sorry," she said, her own voice thick with emotion. "But you know what? This isn't about you being unlovable. It's about their misguided attempt to fix what they think is broken with Emily." Her words, though meant to comfort, only deepened my anguish. I had always thought that gifts were expressions of love, not tools to manipulate or control. And now, it felt like my efforts had been stolen, my dreams tossed aside in favor of a plan that wasn't even mine. In the midst of my despair, a small seed of defiance began to sprout. I recalled a conversation I once had with my mentor, Mr. Jacobs, a wise, seasoned professional who had taught me the importance of standing up for myself. Sometimes, he had told me, when you feel overlooked or betrayed, it's not because you're unworthy, it's because the people around you are too blinded by their own insecurities to see your value. Prove to them, not through anger but through your own success. His words, though spoken years ago, echoed in my mind now. I decided then that I would not let this betrayal define me. Instead, I would channel my pain into action. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose, though my heart still ached with the sting of rejection. I began to plan how I would confront my parents and, more importantly, how I would prove to myself that I was worth far more than their dismissive decision. I arranged to meet them at our family home, a modest, comfortable house on the outskirts of town that had been the backdrop of countless cherished memories. I rehearsed my thoughts, determined to speak honestly about how their actions had hurt me, but also open to the possibility of understanding their perspective. When I arrived at the house, I found my parents in the living room, engaged in a subdued conversation that quickly fell silent when they saw me. My mother's eyes were red from crying and my father looked older, his face lined with regret. "We need to talk," my mother said softly, her voice trembling. I sat down, my heart pounding, and waited for them to explain. My father began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We thought that by giving Emily this trip, we could help her find a new direction in life. We believed that you, with your stable career and your commitments, wouldn't appreciate such extravagance." It was a misguided attempt to keep peace. I listened in disbelief. Their justification felt cold and calculated, an admission that I was seen as the less desirable child, the one who was too responsible, too set in my ways. The conversation grew heated. I explained that my hard work and sacrifices had been meant to uplift our family, not to be used as leverage against me. I told them that I had saved every dollar from extra shifts and freelance projects with the hope of creating memories with the ones I loved, not to be sidelined in favor of someone they deemed in need of a second chance. My voice trembled with anger and hurt as I demanded, "Why am I not worthy of your love? Why must you choose Emily over me when I've given everything to support our dreams?" Their responses were a mixture of regret and defensiveness. My father admitted that he had always felt that Emily was the fragile one, the one who needed a boost to realize her potential, while I was expected to be the rock, steady, unyielding, and therefore less in need of such a gift. But those words, intended as explanations, only deepened the wound. That day I left the house with a heavy heart, feeling both betrayed and determined. I resolved that I would not allow their skewed perceptions to keep me from pursuing my own dreams. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into my work, channeling my hurt into creativity and productivity. I took on extra projects, refined my skills as a graphic designer, and began networking with professionals in my field. Slowly, I began to see that while my parents had chosen one path for Emily, I could forge my own path, one defined by my own values and ambitions. I also began to reflect deeply on the dynamics of our family. I realized that the favoritism had been a constant undercurrent for as long as I could remember. While I had always worked hard to earn their approval, it seemed that they valued vulnerability and the promise of transformation over stability and consistency. My sister, often unpredictable and at times rebellious, had always been the one they seemed to rally around when things went awry. It was a painful revelation that stung with the knowledge that I had never been enough for them, despite all my efforts. But I also recognized that their choices were their own, and I refused to let their misguided affection derail my own progress. As the months passed, I began to rebuild not just my career but my sense of self-worth. I enrolled in workshops to improve my design portfolio, attended seminars on personal branding, and even started a small blog where I chronicled my journey of overcoming family betrayal. The process was cathartic. Every post, every shared experience, helped me understand that I was not defined by my family's inability to appreciate me. I received messages from strangers who thanked me for being honest about my struggles, which in turn reinforced my belief that my voice mattered. The blog gradually gained a modest following. Readers resonated with my story, the pain of being left out, the sting of betrayal, and ultimately the resilience to forge ahead. I began to use my platform to discuss not only personal healing but also the importance of setting boundaries and recognizing one's own worth. I wrote about how I had learned that love should never come at the cost of your dreams, and that every rejection is a chance to redefine your future. My writing, raw and unfiltered, became a beacon for those who had felt marginalized or undervalued by their own families. One chilly winter evening, as I was wrapping up a blog post about self-worth, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Mark. "I'm sorry for what happened," he wrote. "I always knew you were amazing. Let's talk." His words, sincere and unexpected, sparked a conversation that slowly began to mend some of the broken family ties. Mark confided that he had often felt torn between his mother's favoritism and his admiration for my perseverance. His apology, though simple, was a turning point, a sign that not all was lost in our fractured family dynamic. Encouraged by this small glimmer of reconciliation, I reached out to a few other relatives, attempting to bridge the gap that had grown over years of unspoken resentments. I learned that some of them had felt guilty for having taken my presence for granted, that they, too, had wished things had been different. These conversations were bittersweet. They did little to erase the pain of that fateful Christmas lie, but they helped me see that I was not alone in my struggle for recognition. There were those who valued me and wanted to see me succeed. As I continued to rebuild my life, I also re-examined my relationship with my parents. I realized that while their actions had hurt me deeply, they were also products of their own insecurities and fears. I began to understand that sometimes, people make choices out of a misguided desire to protect those they love, even if those choices are ultimately harmful. In therapy sessions, I worked through these complex emotions, learning to forgive not for their sake, but to free myself from the chains of resentment that had long held me back. Forgiveness, I discovered, was a gradual process, a series of small steps that eventually led to a quieter, more peaceful acceptance of the past. By the time the next holiday season rolled around, I had transformed much of my pain into a newfound strength. I decided to host a small gathering at my apartment, a celebration of the journey I had endured and the family that had, despite everything, still reached out in moments of regret and reconciliation. The night was filled with honest conversations, laughter that carried the weight of shared understanding, and a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, our family could move forward with more truth and less pretense. I hung a modest wreath on my door and prepared a simple meal, determined to celebrate not the idealized version of Christmas I had once dreamed of, but a real, imperfect version filled with genuine connections and mutual respect. On that evening, as I looked around at the faces of those who had chosen to stand by me, I felt a bittersweet relief. The memory of the lie that had once kept me away, of Christmas being canceled to keep me isolated, was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had taken control of my narrative, turned my pain into a journey of growth, and learned that even when your family's actions cut deeply, you have the power to heal and to rebuild a life that is entirely your own. My journey from that devastating betrayal to a future defined by resilience was long and fraught with hardship. There were days when the weight of rejection seemed unbearable, when I questioned whether I would ever be enough for anyone. But with each passing day, I learned to stand taller, to speak more firmly, and to trust in my own strength. I transformed my loneliness into creative energy, my sorrow into a story that now inspires others who have faced similar betrayals. Today, as I sit in my modest apartment surrounded by mementos of my journey, a framed photo of a happier time, a handwritten letter from my cousin Mark, and a notebook filled with pages of my blog, I realize that I have come a long way. My parents may have lied to keep me away, but in doing so, they inadvertently set me on a path of self-discovery and empowerment. I no longer seek validation from those who could not see my worth. I have learned to define myself through my own achievements, my own dreams, and the quiet strength that grows within me every day. This is my story, a tale of betrayal, of heartbreak, and ultimately, of redemption and growth. I transformed the pain of being excluded by my own family into a journey that has made me stronger, more independent, and more determined to live life on my own terms. While the memory of that deceptive Christmas will always linger as a scar, it now serves as a reminder that sometimes the most profound hurt can lead to the most incredible transformation. I have reclaimed my future, and every day I choose to celebrate the resilient, capable person I have become.